I thought I was there to train a dog. I drove my beat-up Subaru to a concrete fortress on the edge of the city, expecting a Cane Corso with a bite history. Instead, I found Declan O'Malley. 6'4", built like a riot shield, and vibrating with a terrifying static energy that made the air crackle. I tried to run. I tried to tell him I don't babysit billionaires with temper tantrums. But then, the most feared man in the city chased me down the driveway, dropped to his knees in the dirt, and shoved a heavy tactical leash into my hands. His eyes burned with a golden, predatory desperation as he growled the command that changed my life. I need control. Take the leash. Walk me, mistress. Welcome back to the pack, and a massive hello to all our new listeners here at Zero Werewolf Romance Collection. We are so glad you found us. If you are ready for this wild, spicy ride, please like this video, subscribe, and turn on that notification bell immediately so you never miss a beat. Don't forget to share this story with a friend who loves a good alpha romance. I love seeing how far our pack reaches. Drop a comment down below and tell me, where are you listening from today? Let's get into the story. Chapter 1. The Interview from Hell. The engine of the tank, my sun-bleached, forest-green Subaru Forester, gave a final, dying rattle before silencing itself in the driveway. I patted the dashboard affectionately. Good girl, don't vomit any more oil until we get home. I grabbed my kit bag from the passenger seat. It smelled faintly of dried liver and frustration. This was my third interview of the week, and if the client was anything like the last one, a poodle owner who insisted her dog was psychic, not just neurotic, I was going to quit and become a hermit. The O'Malley estate wasn't a house. It was a brutalist concrete fortress jutting out of the landscape like a mood swing. No flowers, no welcome mat, just sharp angles and expensive security cameras. I smoothed my flannel shirt, checked that my cargo pants were buttoned, and marched to the door. I was here to train a Cane Corso with severe aggression issues, according to the brief email. The door swung open before I could knock. There was no butler. There was only a man who took up so much space he seemed to block out the sun. Declan O'Malley was terrifying. He was built like a riot shield, broad, dense, and radiating a kind of static energy that made the hair on my arms stand up. He wore a charcoal t-shirt that was straining across a chest thick with muscle, and his face looked like it had been carved out of something unyielding, scarred, and rough. But it was his eyes that stopped me. They were a stormy slate gray, but they actually flickered, with a bizarre amber light. He looked exhausted, like a man who hadn't slept since the invention of the wheel. "You're the handler?" His voice was a low gravel slide that vibrated in my sternum. "Piper Galloway," I said, extending a hand that he ignored. "I'm here for the dog. Where is he? Is he crated?" Declan began to pace. It wasn't a casual walk. It was the stalking prowl of a caged tiger. "No dog," he gritted out, running a hand through his dark hair. "Misunderstanding." I blinked. I drove 45 minutes to the edge of civilization for a misunderstanding? Look, Mr. O'Malley, my rates are non-negotiable for cancellations. "I don't need a refund," he snapped, turning on me so fast I flinched. The air around him felt hot, heavy with the scent of ozone and burning wood. "I need management, discipline." I looked around the barren, modern foyer. There was no dog bowl, no chew toys, just this massive, vibrating man looking at me like I was the only water in a desert. "You don't have a dog," I stated, the realization hitting me with a cold splash of absurdity. "You got me out here on a lie." "I have behavioral issues," Declan rasped, his hands clenching into fists at his sides. "Aggression, excess energy. I need to be walked." I stared at him. The silence stretched, tight as a piano wire. Then, my indignation flared hot and bright. "I rehabilitate canines, Mr. O'Malley," I said, my voice sharp enough to cut glass. "I fix fear-biters and resource guarders. I do not babysit grown men with mommy issues and a degradation kink." I spun on the heel of my muddy Blundstones. "Do not contact me again." I stormed out, my heart hammering against my ribs. I made it to the Subaru and yanked the door open. "Wait!" The shout was guttural, raw. I turned. Declan had followed me. He stood in the driveway, his chest heaving. He looked like he was physically fighting himself, his muscles locking up. He reached into his back pocket and pulled something out. It was a leash. Not a flimsy pet store string, but a heavy-duty, tactical leather lead with a carabiner clip. He dropped to his knees on the asphalt. The impact sounded painful. He shoved the handle toward me, his head bowed, his breathing ragged. "I'm not asking you to babysit," he choked out. The amber light in his eyes was consuming the gray now, glowing with predatory desperation. "My control is slipping. I need a command. Take the leash. Walk me, mistress." Chapter 2. The Contract. For a solid 10 seconds, the only sound was the wind rustling the decorative ornamental grasses and the distant hum of the highway. I looked down at the man kneeling on the pavement, a billionaire construction mogul presumably, offering me a leash like it was the crown jewels. My first instinct was to pepper spray him. My hand actually twitched toward the canister in my pocket, but I paused. I've seen aggression in dogs 1,000 times. I know the difference between a dog that wants to kill you and a dog that is terrified of what it might do. Declan O'Malley wasn't looking at me with lust, he was looking at me with panic. He was sweating, his knuckles white around the leather. He looked like a man holding back a landslide with his bare hands. And, frankly, my rent was due in 3 days, and the tank needed new brake pads. "Get up," I said. My voice was automatic, my handler voice. Flat, authoritative, brooking no argument. He didn't move. He was trembling. I said, "Get up!" I stepped into his personal space, grabbing the leash from his hand. It was warm from his grip. Declan's head snapped up. The gold in his eyes was blinding. He scrambled to his feet, towering over me, breathing hard. "This is not sexual," I warned, pointing a calloused finger at his chest. "If you make this weird, I will tase you. I have a cattle prod in the trunk, and I know how to use it." "Not sexual," he agreed, his voice sounding like rocks tumbling in a dryer. "Grounding. I need focus." "Fine," I exhaled, feeling like I was stepping off a cliff. "You want to be treated like a high-drive working breed? Fine. We're doing a perimeter check. Fast pace. No stopping to sniff." I clipped the carabiner onto the belt loop of his jeans. It was ridiculous. It was insane. But as soon as the metal clicked, a shudder went through him. His shoulders dropped 2 inches. "Let's go," I commanded. "Heel!" We walked. I marched him around the perimeter of his massive estate. I made him jog. I made him change directions abruptly. Every time his attention drifted or his breathing hitched, I snapped the leash, just a corrective tug, and barked, "Eyes on me!" It worked. It was terrifyingly effective. The physical exertion combined with the external mental override seemed to drain the chaotic energy right out of him. After 20 minutes, the manic vibration in his frame ceased. We ended back at the driveway. He was drenched in sweat, his chest heaving, but the amber in his eyes had receded to a calm steel gray. He looked human again. "Sit," I said, testing the waters. Declan O'Malley, CEO, construction mogul, and absolute giant, sank onto the front steps of his porch without hesitation. He looked up at me, clarity returning to his gaze. "Better?" I asked, crossing my arms. "Yes," he breathed, wiping his face with his shirt. He looked at me with a reverence that made me squirm. "The noise, it stopped." "That'll be $500, I said, unclipping the leash. "Cash or Venmo, and I'm charging you extra for the emotional distress." He didn't blink. "I'll pay you double. Come back tomorrow." "I have a schedule, Mr. O'Malley." "Triple," he countered, "and I'll fix your car. It sounds like a dying tractor." I looked at the tank. I looked at his desperate, handsome, scarred face. "Fine," I sighed, opening my car door. "Same time tomorrow. Don't make me regret this." Chapter 3. Meet the Colonel. The next day, my sitter canceled. Usually, I'd leave my pet at home, but Colonel Mustard had been exhibiting signs of separation anxiety, chewing the baseboards, and I wasn't about to lose my security deposit. So, when I pulled up to the O'Malley Fortress, the passenger seat was occupied by a camouflaged travel carrier. Declan was waiting on the porch. He looked better today, less like an exploding bomb, more like a brooding statue. He was wearing work boots and jeans that fit entirely too well. When I stepped out, he inhaled deeply, his nostrils flaring. "You brought someone," he said. It wasn't a question, it was an accusation. His body tensed, the predator reasserting itself. "Relax, Cujo," I said, grabbing my gear. My sitter bailed. "Meet the Colonel." I placed the carrier on the hood of his pristine black Ford F-450 and unzipped the front. Colonel Mustard, my tricolored Abyssinian guinea pig, waddled to the opening. He blinked his dark, beady eyes, twitched his nose, and let out a sharp, indignant wheek. Declan took a step back. A genuine step back. He looked at the 3-pound rodent with the same wariness one might reserve for a live grenade. "What?" Declan asked slowly. "Is that?" "Colonel Mustard," I introduced. "He's highly disciplined. Don't make sudden movements. He judges quickly and harshly." The Colonel stared at Declan. He didn't retreat. He didn't exhibit the usual prey animal fear response. Instead, he puffed his fur up, making himself look like a very angry, very round hairbrush, and fixed the brooding billionaire with a dead-eyed stare. Declan leaned in, mesmerized and slightly disturbed. "Why is he looking at me like that?" "He's assessing your threat level," I said, clipping my clicker to my wrist. "Currently, he thinks you're lacking." "I could crush him with one hand," Declan muttered, though he kept his distance. "And he knows you won't," I breezed past him, "because if you do, I won't walk you. And then who will tell you to sit when you get cranky?" Declan growled, a low, rumbling sound that seemed to come from his chest cavity rather than his throat. Colonel Mustard responded with a chattering of teeth that sounded like a tiny machine gun. "Is he surveilling me?" Declan asked, narrowing his eyes at the guinea pig. "Constantly," I said. "Now, grab the obstacle course cones. We're doing agility drills today. If you can jump a 6-foot fence, you can weave through some plastic markers." Declan glared at the rodent one last time. "I don't trust him. He smells like hay and arrogance." "Takes one to know one," I quipped. "Move it, O'Malley. The clock's ticking." Declan grumbled, but he picked up the cones. As he walked away, I saw him glance back over his shoulder, just to make sure the Colonel wasn't flanking him. I smiled. This was going to be the weirdest job of my life. Chapter 4. Boundaries and Banter. The session had gone surprisingly well. We had progressed from heel to complex directional commands, and Declan moved with a fluidity that was terrifyingly graceful for a man of his mass. But the moment I turned the key in the ignition of the tank, the peace shattered. My Subaru Forester roared to life with a sound that could only be described as a tractor gargling a bag of wrenches. A cloud of blue smoke puffed indignantly from the tailpipe. Declan, who had been leaning against the porch railing looking annoyingly majestic in his sweat-damp t-shirt, winced. His hands flew to his ears, which I remembered were hypersensitive, and his expression darkened. He marched to the driver's side window before I could shift into reverse. "Get out!" he barked, the command rough and low. "Excuse me?" I revved the engine, drowning him out purely for spite. "I'm off the clock, O'Malley. Unless you want to pay my overtime rate, step away from the vehicle." "Piper, that machine is a death trap. It sounds like it's screaming in pain." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a key fob. It was sleek, heavy, and definitely belonged to something German and expensive. "Take the SUV in the third garage. It's a G-Wagon. It's armored. It has brakes that actually function." I stared at the key fob dangling from his calloused fingers. My spine stiffened. This was the billionaire playbook. Throw money at a problem until it goes away. He saw my car as a problem. I saw it as my independence. Put that away, I said, my voice dropping to a temperature that could freeze helium. I am not a sugar baby, Declan. I am a contractor. I drive what I can afford. It's not charity, he argued, his amber eyes flashing with frustration. It's a safety hazard. I can smell the burning oil from here. It's offensive. Your attitude is offensive. Move. He didn't move. Instead, he pocketed the key, let out a growl that vibrated the door panel, and dropped to the ground. Before I could process what was happening, he had slid underneath my car on the dirty asphalt. Declan, what are you doing? I shrieked, leaning out the window. You're wearing a $300 shirt. Fixing the exhaust flange. His voice echoed from the undercarriage, muffled by steel and grease. And the muffler mount is rusted through. Hand me the tire iron. What? Tire iron. Trunk. Now. I blinked. I looked at Colonel Mustard in the passenger seat. The colonel looked at me, chewed a piece of hay, and gave a small nod that clearly said, "Do as the large man says." For 20 minutes, I stood there and watched the CEO of O'Malley Demolition perform manual surgery on my car. When he slid out, his face was smeared with grease, his knuckles were skinned, and he looked happier than I had ever seen him. He stood up, wiping his hands on a rag he'd conjured from somewhere. Try it now. I turned the key. The tank purred. Well, it didn't purr. It hummed aggressively, but the death rattle was gone. How did you do that without tools? I asked, bewildered. Declan smirked, a dangerous, lopsided thing that did funny things to my stomach. He flexed a hand that looked like it could crush a bowling ball. I'm good with my hands, Piper. See you tomorrow. Chapter 5. The Scent of Trouble. I made a mistake. I went on a date. His name was Brad. He was a systems analyst. He drove a Honda Civic that didn't smell like wet dog, and he thought spicy meant putting extra pepper on his pasta. On paper, Brad was perfect. He was safe. He was normal. He was the antidote to the chaotic, high-voltage world of Declan O'Malley. We went to a generic Italian bistro. I wore a dress. I even put on perfume, something floral that Sloane had bought me for Christmas. I spent 2 hours nodding while Brad explained the intricacies of blockchain. I went home feeling safe, bored, and strangely hollow. The next morning, I arrived at the O'Malley estate ready to work. I had the clicker on my wrist and a bag of high-value venison jerky in my pocket. Declan was waiting in the foyer, but he wasn't the calm, grounded client I had left yesterday. He was pacing again, the air around him crackling with that terrifying static. As soon as I walked in, he stopped. His head snapped toward me, nostrils flaring wide. Who is he? The question wasn't spoken, it was snarled. I froze, my hand hovering over the doorknob. Declan closed the distance between us in a blink, invading my personal space. He loomed over me, inhaling sharply near my neck. His eyes were blazing gold, the pupil a vertical slit. Excuse me? I stammered, backing up until I hit the wall. You smell like him, Declan accused, his voice a low rumble that shook the floorboards. Cheap cologne, garlic, and boredom. Who is he? That is none of your business, I snapped, finding my courage. I pushed against his chest. It was like pushing a brick wall. I have a personal life, Declan. I went on a date. So what? It's wrong, he growled, his hands twitching at his sides as if he wanted to grab me, but was physically restraining himself. You shouldn't smell like anyone else. You're my handler. I am your employee, I shouted, clicking the clicker right in his face. Click, click. Back off. The sharp sound cut through the haze. Declan blinked, shaking his head as if waking from a trance. He stumbled back, running a hand over his face. He looked horrified. I'm sorry, he rasped, turning away from me. The scent, it was invasive. It triggered a territorial response. A territorial response? I straightened my shirt, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm. I am not a fire hydrant you can claim, O'Malley. If you ever corner me like that again, I walk. Permanently. He didn't look at me. He stared at his hands, his shoulders hunched under an invisible weight. "It won't happen again," he whispered. "Please, just wash it off, please." I went to the bathroom and scrubbed my neck until it was red. I told myself it was to be professional, but deep down, the way he had looked at me, possessive, desperate, and starving, had ignited a heat in my belly that Brad and his blockchain never could. Chapter 6. First Blood. 2 days later, the dynamic shifted again. Declan called me at 7 a.m., his voice tight. "I need you at the yard, the construction site on 4th and Main. I have a structural inspection, and the noise levels are difficult." I arrived 20 minutes later. The yard was a chaotic symphony of jackhammers, shouting men, and grinding gears. It was sensory hell. I could see why Declan, with his super hearing, would be on edge. He was standing near a half-demolished office building, wearing a hard hat and a high-visibility vest that strained across his chest. He looked authoritative, commanding his crew with sharp hand signals. But I saw the tension in his jaw. He was holding it together by a thread. I walked up, staying just inside his peripheral vision. "Eyes on me," I said softly, not needing to shout. He turned, locking onto my gaze. His shoulders relaxed instantly. "Thank you for coming." "Just doing my job. Breathe, Declan." He nodded, turning back to the foreman to discuss a load-bearing wall. I stood back, watching him work. There was an undeniable competence to him that was incredibly attractive. Then, physics decided to take a holiday. A crane overhead, carrying a massive I-beam intended for the foundation support, gave a sickening metallic screech. The cable snapped. It happened in slow motion. The beam, easily 2 tons of solid steel, plummeted. Directly underneath it was a young worker, a kid who couldn't have been more than 20, frozen in terror. "Move!" I screamed, but it was too late. There was a blur of motion. Not human speed. It was a gray streak. Declan didn't tackle the kid. He stepped under the beam. Boom! The impact shook the ground, sending up a cloud of concrete dust. I squeezed my eyes shut, expecting a scream, a crunch, blood. Silence. The dust settled. Declan O'Malley was standing in a squat, his boots cracked through the concrete pavement. His arms were raised above his head. His veins were bulging like thick ropes, his t-shirt shredded at the seams. He was holding the beam. 2 tons of steel. He was holding it up. The worker scrambled away, sobbing. Declan turned his head slowly. His face was a mask of strain, teeth gritted, sweat pouring down his temple. But his eyes... they met mine. They weren't gray. They weren't just amber. They were glowing with a terrifying, ancient luminescence. He threw the beam aside, threw it, crashing it into a pile of rubble like it was made of styrofoam. The entire construction crew stood in stunned silence. A pin drop would have sounded like a gunshot. Declan looked at his hands, then at me. He saw the shock on my face. He saw that I knew. "Declan?" I whispered, taking a step forward. He didn't wait. He vaulted over a 6-foot concrete barrier and sprinted toward the alleyway, moving faster than a car, disappearing into the shadows before anyone could breathe. I stood there, surrounded by dust and confused men, realizing that my behavioral aggression case was something far, far more dangerous. Chapter 7. The Confrontation. Most people, upon seeing a man lift a literal building support beam with his bare hands, would run. They would call the police, or a priest, or perhaps Marvel Studios. I did run, initially. I drove the tank home in a fugue state, my hands gripping the steering wheel so hard, my knuckles turned the color of old parchment. I sat on my kitchen floor for 3 hours, eating stale pretzels while Colonel Mustard judged me from his cage. I Googled hysterical strength. I Googled experimental military steroids. I even, in a moment of true desperation, Googled radioactive spider bites in the tri-state area. None of it made sense. The way his eyes glowed, the growling, the hypersensitivity to sound, the way he reacted to the leash like it was a lifeline to sanity. Logic dictated I should ghost him, block his number, move to a different state, maybe change my name to Brenda. But I wasn't Brenda. I was Piper Galloway, and I hated unanswered questions more than I hated retractable leashes. At 8 p.m., I drove back to the fortress. The lights were off, the gate was closed, but I knew the code, 1234, which was insulting to security professionals everywhere. I parked the tank right in front of the massive oak doors and pounded on the wood until my fist ached. "Open up, O'Malley! I know you're in there brooding!" Nothing. "I'm not leaving. I have a sleeping bag and a very loud playlist of bagpipe music." The door cracked open. Declan stood in the shadows. He looked wrecked. His hair was standing on end, his shirt was torn, likely the same one from the site, and he held a bottle of whiskey loosely in one hand. He didn't turn on the foyer light. "Go home, Piper," he rasped. His voice was a wreck of gravel and pain. "No." I pushed past him, marching into the dark living room. I slammed my binder of internet printouts onto his glass coffee table. "Sit." The command was automatic. His body betrayed him. His knees buckled, and he sank onto the couch before his brain could protest. He looked up at me, his eyes glowing a dull, sickly amber in the gloom. "Explain," I demanded, crossing my arms. "And don't give me the adrenaline speech. I saw you throw 2 tons of steel like it was a frisbee. What are you? Steroids? PCP? Some kind of government super soldier experiment gone wrong?" Declan let out a humorless laugh, tilting his head back against the cushions. "You think the government could make this?" He gestured vaguely to his massive frame. "Then what?" I stepped closer, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. "Why do you growl at the mailman? Why do you smell emotions? Why does a $20 piece of leather make you stop shaking?" He looked at me then, really looked at me. The silence stretched, heavy and suffocating. "Because I'm a predator, Piper," he whispered, the amber light in his eyes flaring. "I'm not human, and you should have run when you had the chance." Chapter 8. The Revelation. "Not human." I repeated the words flatly. "Okay, great. So what? Vampire? Demon? Swamp thing?" "Werewolf," he said. He didn't blink. I waited for the punchline. I looked around for a hidden camera crew. "A werewolf? Like full moon, silver bullets, howling at the moon?" "The moon has nothing to do with it," Declan muttered, pouring himself a glass of whiskey. His hand was shaking. "It's biological, a genetic divergence. We shift, we heal, we have a hierarchy." He stood up and began to pace, the restless energy returning. "I'm an alpha. That means I absorb the psychic noise of every member of my pack. It's like standing in a room with 50 radios blasting different stations. It's deafening. It leads to feral degeneration." He stopped and looked at me, his expression tortured. "That's why I hired you. A human anchor can ground an alpha. Your voice, it cuts through the static. It quiets the wolf. When I'm on the leash, when I'm following your commands, I don't have to be the alpha. I can just be." I stood there, processing this. It wasn't the magic that bothered me. It wasn't the fur or the teeth. It was the lie. "So," I said, my voice dangerously quiet, "I'm not a consultant. I'm a medical device." Declan flinched. "No, it's not like that." "It is exactly like that." My indignation flared hot. "You hired me under false pretenses to perform unauthorized psychological therapy on a supernatural apex predator. You didn't ask for my consent to be your anchor. You just handed me a leash and used me to fix your brain chemistry." "I couldn't tell you," Declan roared, the sound vibrating the windows. "The veil. If you knew, you'd be in danger. The council would—" "I don't care about your council," I shouted back. I wasn't scared of him. I was furious. "I care about accountability, Declan. I care that you let me walk into this blind. I thought I was helping a man with anger issues, not acting as a Xanax prescription for a wolf. I grabbed my bag. I felt tears pricking my eyes, which made me even angrier. I hated crying. Piper, wait. He took a step toward me, reaching out. Don't! I snapped. I didn't use my command voice. I used my own voice. Don't come near me. He froze. I train dogs, Declan, I said, my voice trembling. I rehabilitate animals that people have given up on, but I do it based on trust. You don't trust me. You just need me, and I don't participate in paranormal therapy. I turned and walked out the door. This time, he didn't follow. Chapter 9. Withdrawal. It had been 7 days, 168 hours. My apartment felt small. It smelled like lavender laundry detergent and sadness. I was lying on my couch, staring at the ceiling, wearing the same sweatpants I had put on 3 days ago. On the floor, Colonel Mustard was sitting in his pigloo, staring at a piece of organic bell pepper with disdain. He hadn't weaked in 2 days. He was on a hunger strike in solidarity with my misery, or perhaps he just missed the high-quality produce Declan kept in his fridge. The door buzzer rang. I ignored it. 5 minutes later, my front door unlocked. Sloane walked in, wearing her blue scrubs and holding a terrifyingly large iced coffee. "You look like a crime scene," she announced, kicking off her shoes. "Go away," I mumbled, pulling a blanket over my head. "I have the flu." "You don't have the flu," Sloane said, ripping the blanket off. "You have stupid alpha male withdrawal. I've seen it in meth addicts, and frankly, they have better complexions than you right now." "He lied to me, Sloane." I sat up, hugging my knees. He's a wolf, a literal wolf, and he used me to keep his brain from melting." Sloane didn't look surprised. She just handed me the coffee. "Honey, we live in a city where the mayor hasn't aged since 1995. I assumed Declan was something weird. But did he hurt you?" "No," I admitted. "He fixed my car. He bought organic kale for the Colonel. He looked at me like I was the only person in the world who made sense." "And now you're miserable," Sloane pointed out. "And look at this." She pulled up a news article on her phone and shoved it in my face. "O'Malley demolition stock plummets amid rumors of CEO instability." The photo showed Declan leaving his office building. He looked gaunt. Dark circles bruised the skin under his eyes. He looked like he was holding himself together with duct tape and spite. "He's falling apart without you," Sloane said softly. "And you're not doing so hot either. The bond goes both ways, Pips. You grounded him, but he made you feel safe. You're physically craving the proximity." I looked at the photo. He looked like he was in pain. A physical ache started in my chest, a pull that felt like a hook behind my navel, dragging me across the city toward the brutalist concrete fortress. "It doesn't matter," I whispered, dropping the phone. "He's a monster, and I'm just a dog walker." Chapter 10. The Threat Emerges. I decided to leave the apartment. Sloane forced me to shower, claiming I smelled like depression and guinea pig hay, and pushed me out the door to get fresh air. I went to a coffee shop 3 blocks away. It was a hipster place with exposed brick and overpriced lattes, neutral ground where I could pretend to be a normal human woman who didn't know that werewolves ran the construction industry. I was waiting for my oat milk latte when I felt eyes on me. Not the warm, heavy weight of Declan's gaze. This felt slimy, cold, like a snake sliding over my skin. "Piper Galloway?" I turned. Standing behind me was a man who looked like he'd been manufactured in a boardroom. He was slim, wearing a bespoke suit that cost more than my life, with slicked-back blonde hair and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Do I know you?" I asked, gripping my purse strap. "Not yet," he said smoothly. "I'm Victor Mercer. I'm a business associate of Mr. O'Malley." My stomach dropped. "I don't work for Mr. O'Malley anymore." "Oh, I know," Victor said, stepping closer. He smelled like expensive cologne and something metallic, like old pennies. Blood. That's precisely why I'm here. You see, Declan has been erratic lately. Sloppy. Weak. He leaned in, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. The barista called out, "Latte for Piper!" But I couldn't move. "Iron River is vulnerable," Victor murmured, "and everyone knows that Declan O'Malley is an unguided missile. But you were the guidance system." He reached out and tucked a stray curl behind my ear. I slapped his hand away. "Don't touch me!" I snapped. Victor's smile widened, revealing teeth that looked just a little too sharp. "Feisty. I see why he likes you. But here's the reality, Miss Galloway. A beast without a leash eventually gets put down. And if you aren't holding the handle, someone else has to put a bullet in him." He dropped a business card into my empty hand. It was black with a silver copperhead snake embossed on it. "Think about it," he whispered. "You must be the leash holding the beast back. It would be a shame if that leash snapped." He turned and walked out of the shop, blending seamlessly into the pedestrian traffic. I stood there, trembling, the pull in my chest suddenly turning into a screaming alarm. Declan was in trouble, and I was the only one who could stop it. Chapter 11. The Return. The pull wasn't a metaphor anymore. It was a physical hook lodged behind my sternum, reeling me in. After Victor Mercer disappeared into the crowd, the sensation spiked from a dull ache to a screaming alarm. My hands shook as I unlocked the Subaru. The drive to the O'Malley estate usually took 45 minutes. I made it in 28. The tank groaned in protest as I slammed it into park on the gravel driveway, but I didn't pat the dashboard this time. I was already running. The front door was ajar. Not open, broken. The heavy oak frame was splintered near the lock. "Declan!" I screamed, pushing inside. The smell hit me first. Ozone, pine, and the coppery tang of something feral. The foyer was a disaster zone. An antique vase lay in shards. Deep gouges marred the plaster walls, looking suspiciously like claw marks. A guttural roar echoed from the living room, a sound so deep it vibrated the fillings in my teeth. I rounded the corner and skidded to a halt. Declan was there, but he wasn't the man I knew. He was stripped to the waist, his skin slick with sweat, his body contorted in agony. His bones were audible, popping and cracking as they rearranged themselves. His jaw was unhinged, extended too far forward, and patches of coarse, dark fur were erupting along his spine. His eyes were entirely gold, no pupil, just blinding, mindless light. He was mid-shift, and he was destroying everything in reach. He had ripped a leather armchair in half. He turned toward me. A low, vibrating snarl ripped from his throat. He didn't recognize me. I was just movement. I was prey. Fear punched me in the gut, sharp and cold. But beneath the fear, the pull snapped into place. This wasn't a monster. This was Declan, and he was terrified. He lunged. I didn't run. I planted my feet, widened my stance, and dropped my voice to the register I used for 150-pound mastiffs. "Declan! Sit!" The command cracked through the room like a whip. The effect was instantaneous. The massive, shifting creature froze mid-step. The gold in his eyes flickered, warring with the gray of the man buried underneath. He whined, a high, pained sound that broke my heart. "Down!" I commanded, softer now, but with steel underneath. "Eyes on me! Down!" He collapsed. His knees hit the floor with a bone-jarring thud. He shook violently, the fur receding, the bones snapping back into human alignment with sickening wet crunches. He curled into a ball, hiding his face in his hands, shivering. I walked over, ignoring the glass on the floor, and knelt beside him. I didn't touch him yet. I just let my presence wash over him. "Good boy," I whispered. "I've got you." Chapter 12. Renegotiation. It took an hour to get him from the floor to the sofa. He was burning up. His skin radiated heat like a furnace. I found a throw blanket and draped it over his shoulders, covering his nakedness. He wouldn't let go of my wrist. His grip was bruising, desperate, as if he thought I would vanish if he broke contact. "You came back," he rasped. His voice was wrecked, raw from the growling. "Why?" "Because a snake in a suit threatened you," I said, handing him a glass of water. "Victor Mercer. He paid me a visit." Declan stiffened, the water glass cracking in his hand. "Mercer found you? Did he touch you?" "He tried. I have pepper spray," I said, brushing it off. "But he said you were a beast without a leash, and looking at your living room, he wasn't wrong." Declan looked away, shame darkening his features. "The withdrawal. It accelerates the feral state. I couldn't stop the noise, Piper. It was loud." "I know." I took a deep breath. "So here's the deal. I stay, but the lying stops. No more consultant crap. You tell me everything. If you smell a threat, you tell me. If you want to eat a deer, you warn me so I can look away. Total transparency." He looked at me, hope warring with disbelief. "You'd stay? After seeing that?" "I've seen worse. I once watched a Great Dane eat a drywall partition." I squeezed his hand. "But we are partners, Declan. Not master and pet. Partners." "Partners," he vowed. "Anything." "Good. Now, move over." He blinked. "What?" "The bond," I explained, feeling the flush rise in my cheeks. "Sloane told me about the proximity requirement. I can feel it. You can feel it. If I leave this room, you start shaking again, so I'm sleeping here." I kicked off my boots and climbed onto the massive sofa beside him. I kept my flannel shirt on. This wasn't sexual, not yet. It was medicinal. Declan hesitated, then carefully, reverently, laid his head on my shoulder. He was heavy, warm, and solid. The moment his skin touched mine, the pull in my chest vanished, replaced by a hum of contentment. "Thank you," he whispered into my neck. "Shut up and sleep, O'Malley," I murmured, "or I'm getting the crate." Chapter 13. Domestic Bliss. Sort of. The next morning, the O'Malley estate transformed from a haunted house into a hive of activity. My presence seemed to act as a localized sedative. The static Declan complained about dampened significantly as long as I was in the room. We fell into a bizarre rhythm. I sat at his massive mahogany desk, reviewing my own client emails, while he paced around his office on conference calls, negotiating demolition contracts. Whenever his voice rose, whenever the growl started to creep into his baritone, I would clear my throat or tap my pen on the desk. He would instantly check himself, breathe, and return to a human volume. "You're micromanaging me," he grumbled after one such call, though he was smiling. "I'm behavior shaping you," I corrected. "There's a difference." Around noon, I realized the atmosphere was getting too heavy. The pack, men and women in high-vis vests who came in and out of the office, were terrified of him. They walked on eggshells. "We need to humanize you," I announced. I dug into my bag and pulled out a bright red bandana. It was meant for a golden retriever named Buster, but it would have to do. "Put this on," I said. Declan stared at the fabric. "Piper, I am the alpha of the Iron River Pack. I control 70% of the city's construction. I cannot wear a bandana." "Mercer thinks you're a rabid animal," I countered, stepping into his space. I tied the bandana around his neck. It looked ridiculous against his scarred, rugged throat. "This shows you're domesticated. It's psychological warfare." He sighed, the sound rumbling in his chest, but he didn't take it off. When his beta, a man named Rafferty, walked in 10 minutes later, he stopped dead. He looked at the bandana. He looked at the terrifying Alpha King. "Don't ask," Declan growled. "It means he's a good boy," I chirped from the desk. Rafferty looked terrified. Declan just smirked, leaning back in his chair. "You heard her, Rafferty. Proceed with the report." Chapter 14. The Beta's Warning. Rafferty was a problem. He was a lean, wiry man with eyes that constantly scanned the exits. As the beta, His job was logistics and security, and he viewed me as a walking, talking security breach. He cornered me in the kitchen while I was preparing a salad for Colonel Mustard, who I had retrieved from my apartment, much to Declan's dismay. "You shouldn't be here," Rafferty said. He didn't growl, but his tone was icy. "You're a liability, Miss Galloway. Mercer knows about you. If he takes you, Declan will surrender the territory to get you back. You are a weakness." "I'm an asset," I corrected, chopping a cucumber with a little more force than necessary. "Without me, your alpha is a feral wreck who destroys living room furniture." "He needs a pack mate," Rafferty insisted. "Someone strong, not a human who needs saving." He slammed a file folder on the counter. "This is the Mercer contract bid for the waterfront project. Declan wants to sign it to keep the peace. It's a bad deal, but he's not thinking straight because he's too busy staring at you." I wiped my hands and opened the file. I'm not a lawyer, but I know contracts. I read the fine print on liability clauses every day. I scanned the document. My eyes narrowed. "Here," I pointed to paragraph 14, subsection C, the demolition debris removal. It specifies PAC-approved disposal sites. But look at the addendum. Rafferty frowned. "What about it?" "The addendum lists the sites. They're all EPA-protected wetlands," I said. "If Declan signs this, Mercer isn't just taking the job. He's framing Iron River for environmental felonies. You'd be shut down by the feds in a week." Rafferty stared at the paper. He sniffed it, as if the deceit had a scent. His eyes widened. I missed that," he admitted. "Yeah, you did," I said, picking up my cucumber, "because you were too busy measuring my weakness. Take it to Declan. Tell him to counteroffer with his own disposal sites." Rafferty looked at me with a new expression. "Respect? Maybe." "I'll tell him," he muttered. "And keep the bandana. It's unnerving. It works." Chapter 15. The Gala, Not a Gala. "It is not a gala," Declan insisted for the 10th time as we drove toward the warehouse district. "It is a summit. We drink cheap beer, we posture, and we ensure nobody kills anyone." "So, a frat party with claws," I summarized. I looked down at my outfit. Per the constraints of my life, I didn't own a ball gown. I was wearing black fitted jeans, combat boots, and a leather jacket over a silk camisole. I looked less like a alpha's consort and more like I was ready to start a bar fight. The venue was an abandoned meatpacking plant turned underground club. The bass was heavy enough to alter my heartbeat. The air smelled of sweat, alcohol, and that distinct, spicy scent of shifter. Declan kept a hand on the small of my back. He was tense. The crowd parted for him like the Red Sea. He radiated power, his amber eyes scanning the room. We reached the VIP section, a rusted catwalk overlooking the dance floor. "Stay close," he murmured into my ear. "Do not engage with anyone." "Well, well," a voice purred from the shadows. A woman stepped out. She was gorgeous in a terrifying way, tall, with hair the color of spilled oil and eyes that were pure, predatory green. She wore a dress that was mostly suggestions. "Vesper," Declan greeted, his voice cold. "This is not your territory." "I go where the fun is," she smirked, her gaze sliding to me. She sniffed the air visibly. "And you brought a pet. How quaint. Does she do tricks?" "She bites," Declan warned, stepping in front of me. "I doubt it." Vesper moved faster than I could track. One moment she was 5 feet away, the next she was in my face, her hand reaching for my throat. "Let's see if she bleeds Psht! The sound of the aerosol can was loud in the sudden silence. Vesper screamed, clutching her eyes. The spicy orange mist of military-grade pepper spray hung in the air. "Ah! My eyes! It burns!" I shook the canister. "Bad dog," I said calmly. "No jumping." The entire VIP section went silent. Declan looked at the sobbing shifter, then at me. A slow, dark smile spread across his face. "Like I said," he told the room, his voice filled with terrifying pride. She bites. Chapter 16. The First Shift. The silence in the warehouse was heavy, the kind of quiet that precedes a thunderclap. Vesper was being dragged away by two of her lackeys, her curses muffled by a wet towel. That left Victor Mercer standing alone on the rusted grate of the catwalk, looking down at us. He didn't look angry. He looked delighted. "Impressive," Mercer called out, his voice smooth as oil. "The rumors are true. The Iron River Alpha has surrendered his teeth to a human female. You wear that bandana like a collar, Declan. It's pathetic." Declan didn't roar. He didn't lunge. He reached up, untied the red bandana, and handed it to me. His movements were slow, deliberate, and terrifyingly calm. "Hold this," he murmured. Then he stripped. He pulled the t-shirt over his head. He shucked off his boots. The crowd below gasped, not out of titillation, but out of primal recognition. They knew what was coming. "Mercer," Declan said, his voice dropping to a subsonic rumble that rattled the corrugated metal walls. "You wanted to test the control? Let's test it." He didn't crouch. He just expanded. The sound was wet and violent, the crack snap of ribs breaking and reknitting in milliseconds. His shoulders broadened, the skin splitting to reveal coarse, charcoal-gray fur. His jaw elongated with a sickening crunch, human teeth replaced by white daggers. It wasn't magic. It was biological trauma. It was gore and power. In 3 seconds, the man was gone. In his place stood a wolf the size of a pony, a creature of shadow and muscle, breathing steam into the cool air. The Alpha. The crowd scrambled back, pressing against the walls. A wolf this size, this close to feral, should have been tearing throats out. The beast turned his massive head toward me. His eyes were burning gold, ancient and alien. He took a step forward, his claws clicking on the metal grate. He lowered his snout until it was inches from my face. I could smell the blood, the musk, the raw power. I didn't flinch. I felt the pull hum in my chest, a warm tether connecting me to the monster. "Hey, buddy," I whispered, my voice steady. I reached out and buried my hand in the thick ruff of fur at his neck. It was coarser than a dog's, hot to the touch. The wolf leaned into my palm, letting out a chuff of air that ruffled my hair. He wasn't mindless. He was Declan, and he was waiting for permission. I looked up at Mercer, who had turned a shade of pale, usually reserved for dead fish. "He's not leashed because he's weak, Victor," I called out, scratching the massive wolf behind the ear. "He's leashed because I'm the only one who can tell him when to stop eating you." The wolf snarled, a sound like a chainsaw starting up, and snapped his jaws at Mercer. Victor flinched, stepping back so fast he nearly tripped over the railing. "We're leaving," I commanded. "Heel!" The monster at my side turned, positioning himself perfectly at my leg, and we walked out of the club. The crowd parted like water. Chapter 17. Intoxication. The drive back to the estate was a blur of silence and speed. Declan had shifted back in the alleyway, a messy, painful process that left him shivering and naked until I threw his spare coat over him. We didn't speak. The air in the G-Wagon, we took his car, was so thick with tension it felt like breathing syrup. The adrenaline from the confrontation was crashing into the mate bond, creating a cocktail of dopamine and desperate need. When we walked through the front door of the fortress, the dam broke. I barely had time to lock the door before he was on me. He didn't pin me against the wall. He fell to his knees in front of me, wrapping his arms around my waist, burying his face in my stomach. "You didn't run," he mumbled into the fabric of my shirt. "You saw the wolf. You touched him." "He has better manners than you," I said, my hands tangling in his dark hair. My heart was hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. "Get up, O'Malley." He stood, and the look in his eyes scorched me. It wasn't the predatory glare of the Alpha. It was raw, naked worship. He scooped me up, lifting me as easily as I lifted a bag of kibble, and carried me up the stairs. In his bedroom, the lights were off, the only illumination coming from the city glow outside. He set me down on the edge of the mattress, but didn't climb on top. He stood between my knees, waiting. "Tell me what you want," he rasped, his hands hovering over my hips, afraid to touch without a cue. "I want you to stop thinking," I whispered, reaching out to trace the scar on his neck. "I want you to let go." "I can't," he groaned, leaning into my touch. "If I let go, I might crush you." "You won't." I grabbed the collar of his shirt and pulled him down. "Because I have the leash, remember?" That broke him. He kissed me, and it wasn't gentle. It was a collision. It was desperate and starving. He tasted like whiskey and ozone. The clothes were gone in a frenzy of buttons and zippers. When skin touched skin, the pull finally snapped shut, a sensation of absolute rightness that made me gasp. It was intense, passionate, and overwhelmingly loud, not with noise, but with sensation. Every touch felt electric. But through it all, the dynamic held. When he got too rough, too lost in the sensation, a single word from me, "Gentle!" and he would freeze, recalibrate, and treat me like spun glass. He didn't just want my body, he wanted my authority. He wanted the peace that came with surrender. And as I wrapped my arms around his broad, scarred shoulders, I realized I didn't just want his strength. I wanted his vulnerability. For the first time in my life, I wasn't just the handler, I was the home. Chapter 18. The Morning After. I woke up trapped. A heavy, muscular arm was draped over my waist, effectively pinning me to the mattress. Declan was asleep, his face buried in the crook of my neck, breathing deeply. He looked younger like this, the lines of stress smoothed out, the constant furrow between his brows gone. I tried to shimmy out. The arm tightened reflexively. "No," he grumbled, half asleep. "Stay." "I have to pee, Declan, and I have a business to run." "Cancel it," he mumbled, nuzzling my collarbone. "I'll buy the business. Stay." I rolled my eyes, though I was smiling. "Release," I commanded softly. It worked. His arm went slack. I slid out of bed, grabbing one of his shirts. It swallowed me whole, hitting my knees. I walked downstairs to the kitchen. The sun was streaming through the brutalist floor-to-ceiling windows. It should have been a peaceful morning scene. Except Colonel Mustard was sitting on the granite island next to his travel carrier, chewing on a piece of parsley with judgmental vigor. "Don't look at me like that," I told the guinea pig. "I'm an adult. I made adult decisions." Mustard wheeked loudly. "He thinks you're being defensive," a voice rumbled. Declan leaned against the doorframe. He was wearing sweatpants and nothing else. The red bandana from the night before was clutched in his hand. He looked thoroughly satisfied and ridiculously handsome. He walked over, ignoring the rodent's glare, and kissed the top of my head. "Coffee?" "Please." He started the espresso machine. "I was thinking," he said, keeping his back to me, "you shouldn't go to the client site today. Mercer is humiliated. He might escalate." "I have a Rottweiler with food aggression scheduled for 10, I said, leaning against the counter. "I'm not hiding in the tower, Rapunzel." "Piper." He turned, his face serious. "You're not just a handler anymore. You're mine. That makes you a target." "I was a target yesterday," I reminded him. "And I handled it. We are partners, O'Malley. Partners don't lock each other up." He clenched his jaw, the amber flickering in his eyes, but he nodded. "Partners, fine. But take the G-Wagon. The Subaru is insufficient." "Deal." I took the coffee he offered, but only because the tank needs an oil change. Chapter 19. The Trap. I should have listened to the paranoid werewolf. I took the G-Wagon to the pet supply store. I needed bedding for the Colonel and, ironically, more clickers. I had left Colonel Mustard at the estate, secure in his fortress of solitude, the guest room, assuming the safest place for him was behind 3 layers of security gates. I was in the checkout line, debating between Timothy Hay and Orchard Grass, when my phone buzzed. "Unknown number." I swiped answer. This is Piper. Miss Galloway. The voice was digital, distorted, but the cadence was familiar. Listen closely, the voice said. Check your messages. The line went dead. My stomach dropped. I pulled the phone away and opened my texts. A video file had just arrived. I pressed play. The camera was shaky. It showed a small, dark cage. Inside, looking furious and wearing his tiny camouflage harness, was Colonel Mustard. A gloved hand reached in and poked him. The colonel tried to bite the finger. A newspaper was held up in the frame. Today's date. Then, text appeared on the screen. The quarry! No wolves! Come alone or the rodent gets it. I dropped the bag of hay. How? The estate was a fortress. Rafferty was there. Security was tight. Unless they had someone on the inside. Or unless they had been watching me, waiting for me to leave him alone for 5 minutes. Panic flared, hot and blinding. They had my pig. They had the colonel. I ran to the G-Wagon. My first instinct was to call Declan. My thumb hovered over his name. No wolves. If Declan showed up, they would kill Mustard. I knew Mercer. He was petty. He would step on my pet just to watch me cry. I threw the G-Wagon into reverse. I wasn't going to the quarry alone. I wasn't stupid. But I wasn't bringing a werewolf. I was bringing a cattle prod. Chapter 20. The Rescue Mission. I made it back to the estate in record time. I didn't go to the main house. I went to the garage where I kept my overflow gear. I was shoving a stun baton, a high-frequency sonic emitter, and a bag of cayenne pepper into my backpack when the garage door rolled up. Declan stood there. He looked like he was about to tear the building down. Rafferty was behind him, looking pale. "Where is he?" Declan roared. "They took him," I said, not stopping my packing. "Mercer has Mustard. He wants me at the quarry, alone." "You are not going," Declan stated, stepping forward to block my path. "It's a trap, obviously." "I know it's a trap," I shouted, zipping the bag. "But he's my dog. Well, pig. He's my responsibility. I am not leaving him to die." "I will send a kill squad," Declan growled. "We will burn the quarry down." "If you send wolves, they kill the hostage." I held up the phone with the ransom note. "Read it!" Declan swiped the phone from my hand, his eyes scanning the text. He vibrated with rage. "I cannot let you walk into a nest of vipers, Piper. If you get hurt..." "I won't get hurt. I know how to handle aggressive animals. And right now, Mercer is just a dog with a resource guarding issue." "She's right," Rafferty chimed in. Declan whipped his head around. "You're siding with her?" "Boss," Rafferty said, stepping forward, "if you go in there, you'll go feral. You're too close to the situation. You'll kill everyone, including the guinea pig, and then the council will execute you. Piper is the only one who can think tactically right now." Declan looked at Rafferty, then at me. He looked at the cattle prod sticking out of my bag. "We compromise," Declan said, his voice hard. "You go in, you make the exchange, but I will be in the woods, downwind, so they don't smell me coming. If I smell one drop of your blood, the truce is over. I kill them all." I looked at his tortured face. He was terrified for me. "Deal," I said, hoisting the backpack. "But you wait for my signal. I want to tase Mercer myself." Declan grabbed the back of my neck and pulled me in for a hard, bruising kiss. "Bring him home, mistress." "Heal, Declan," I whispered against his lips. "Stay." I climbed into the tank. The G-Wagon was too conspicuous. It was time to go to war. Chapter 21. The Warehouse Raid. The quarry looked like the surface of the moon, gray, dusty, and desolate. A rusted, corrugated metal shed stood in the center of the pit. I parked the tank 50 yards out, leaving the engine running. I stepped out, my backpack heavy on my shoulders. I held the cattle prod in my right hand and the remote for the sonic emitter in my left. Victor Mercer was waiting. He stood by a folding table, flanked by 2 hulking enforcers. On the table sat a small, wire cage. "You came alone," Mercer called out, his voice echoing off the rock walls. "How obedient." "I want the pig, Mercer," I shouted, walking steadily forward. "Hand him over, and I walk away." "I don't think so." Mercer smirked, unbuttoning his suit jacket. "I think you stay. And when your alpha comes looking for his stray pet, we put him down." He nodded to his goons. They shifted. It wasn't the slow, painful transformation Declan went through. These were partial shifts, claws extending, teeth lengthening, eyes glowing murky yellow. They started toward me. "Wrong answer," I muttered. I pressed the button on the sonic emitter. I had modified the device from a high-end dog training unit intended to stop barking. I had cranked the frequency up to a level that would be annoying to a human, but agonizing to a predator with enhanced hearing. Scree! It was silent to me, but the effect on the shifters was immediate and violent. The two enforcers clapped their hands over their ears and fell to their knees, screaming. Mercer stumbled back, his face twisting in pain. "Now!" I screamed. I sprinted. I didn't run away. I ran at them. One of the enforcers tried to swipe at me, blind with pain. I jammed the cattle prod into his ribs and triggered the charge. He convulsed and dropped like a sack of wet cement. I reached the table. Colonel Mustard was running circles in his cage, chattering his teeth in a war cry. I grabbed the handle. "You bitch!" Mercer roared, fighting through the noise. He lunged at me, his eyes shifting to reptilian slits. Before he could touch me, a blur of gray fur slammed into him. Declan had arrived. He hadn't waited for the signal. He had smelled the adrenaline. He hit Mercer with the force of a freight train, tumbling him into the dirt. "Go!" Declan roared, in human speech, though his voice was distorted by shifting vocal cords. I turned to run, clutching the cage to my chest. A third guard, one I hadn't seen, popped out from behind the shed. He grabbed my jacket. I spun around, ready to use the pepper spray, but I didn't need to. Colonel Mustard, seeing his opportunity, thrust his head through the cage bars and chomped down on the man's finger with the bite force of a rodent who eats carrots like they are enemy combatants. "Ugh!" The guard recoiled, shaking his hand. I kicked him in the shin with my combat boot and scrambled for the car. Chapter 22. The Injury. "Get in!" I screamed, throwing the cage into the passenger seat of the Subaru. Declan was right behind me. He was in human form now, but he was bleeding from a gash on his shoulder, and his shirt was in ribbons. He dove into the driver's seat. He was too big for it, his knees hitting the dashboard, but he slammed the car into gear. "Head down," he ordered. The tank roared, gravel spraying as we peeled out. Mercer was back on his feet. He wasn't shifting. He was reaching into his jacket. He pulled out a gun. It was a silver, long-barreled revolver, antique but deadly. "He has a gun!" I yelled. Bang! The rear windshield shattered. Glass rained down on the back seat. Bang! "We're almost at the tree line," Declan shouted, swerving the car to make us a harder target. Mercer took a steady stance. He was aiming for me. I could see the barrel tracking my silhouette through the side mirror. Bang! Declan didn't swerve this time. He threw his body across the center console, covering me. A sickening thwack echoed in the small cabin. It sounded like a hammer hitting a slab of beef. Declan grunted, a short, sharp exhale of pain, and slumped back into his seat. But he kept driving. He floored the accelerator, and we rocketed out of the quarry and onto the main road. "You're hit," I said, my voice trembling. I reached for his shoulder. "I'm fine," he gritted out, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. "It's just a graze. I'll heal." I looked at his shoulder. There was a hole in his deltoid, but it wasn't healing. It was fizzing. The blood wasn't red. It was turning black, bubbling as if it were boiling. The flesh around the wound was turning necrotic gray. "You're not healing," I whispered, horror cold in my veins. "Declan, that wasn't lead." "Silver," he choked out, his complexion turning ashen. "Nitrate. Coating. Stops the regeneration." The car swerved. His eyes were rolling back in his head. "Pull over!" I commanded. "Declan, pull over now!" Chapter 23. Vulnerability. He managed to steer the car onto a secluded fire trail before he lost consciousness. The Subaru shuddered to a halt under a canopy of pines. I unbuckled him and pushed his seat back. He was sweating profusely, his skin burning hot to the touch. The smell of burning flesh filled the car. "Colonel, keep watch," I told the guinea pig. I grabbed my first aid kit from the glove box. It was meant for dogs. Bandages, antiseptic, tweezers. I cut Declan's shirt open. The wound was ugly. The silver bullet was lodged deep in the muscle, acting like a poison pill. As long as it was inside him, his wolf couldn't fix the damage. He would bleed out in minutes. "Declan," I said, slapping his cheek lightly. "Wake up! I need you to not shift while I do this." His eyelids fluttered. "Piper, run." "Shut up! I'm going to dig it out." I didn't have anesthesia. I had a bottle of lukewarm water and a pair of forceps. "This is going to hurt," I warned him. I probed the wound. Declan screamed, a raw, guttural sound that made birds take flight from the trees above. His back arched off the seat, his eyes flashing gold. "Focus on me!" I shouted, using my command voice. "Look at me! Stay!" He locked eyes with me, his pupils dilating. He grabbed my free hand, squeezing it hard enough to bruise, grounding himself in the pain. "I have it!" I gritted out, feeling the metal click against the forceps. "1, 2... I yanked. With a wet squelch, the bullet came free. I threw it out the window. The effect was miraculous. The moment the silver was gone, the black fizzing stopped. Fresh, bright red blood welled up, washing away the necrosis. I watched, fascinated and nauseous, as the muscle fibers began to knit themselves back together. Declan slumped back, panting, soaked in sweat. The color was returning to his face. "You saved me," he whispered, his voice thick with exhaustion. I wiped my bloody hands on a rag, the adrenaline finally crashing. My hands started to shake. I started to cry. Ugly, silent sobs. "You jumped in front of a bullet," I accused him, my voice cracking. "You idiot! You absolute moron!" "I'd do it again," he murmured. He reached up with his bloodied hand and cupped my cheek, smearing red on my skin. "I love you, Piper. I can't let them break my anchor." I froze. He hadn't just said it because of the bond. I could feel the truth of it radiating off him. "I love you too," I sobbed, leaning into his touch. "Now shut up and heal so I can yell at you properly." Chapter 24. Mercer's Ultimatum. We didn't go back to the estate immediately. We went to a safe house, a nondescript apartment in the city owned by Iron River. Rafferty met us there, looking grim. Declan was sitting on the couch, shirtless, a fresh pink scar on his shoulder, the only evidence of the shooting. Colonel Mustard was eating a victory carrot on the coffee table. "Mercer contacted the council," Rafferty said, pacing the small room. "He claims you attacked him unprovoked on neutral ground. He's challenging your leadership. He's invoked the right of cairn." Declan went still. "The cairn?" "What is that?" I asked, looking between them. "Is that like a lawsuit?" "It's a duel," Declan said, his voice devoid of emotion. "To the death. Winner takes the territory. Loser is buried under the stones." "You can't accept," I said immediately. "You were shot 3 hours ago. You've lost blood. You're not at full strength." "If I refuse, I forfeit the pack," Declan said, looking at me. "Mercer takes over Iron River. He takes the city. And he will come for you." He stood up, the movement fluid but stiff. "I have to accept." "He has a silver gun, Declan." "The right forbids weapons," Rafferty clarified. "Teeth and claws only. Just the beasts." "Since when does Mercer follow rules?" I argued, panic rising. "He shot us on the highway. He kidnapped a rodent." "He can't cheat at the cairn," Declan said, his jaw tightening. "The entire Shifter Council will be watching. If he pulls a gun, he's executed on the spot. He's counting on me being weak." "Are you?" I asked quietly. Declan looked at his hands. My body is healing. But the silver, it disrupts the connection to the wolf. It's like static on the line. I can't hear the instincts clearly. I walked over to him. I placed my hand on his chest, right over his heart. It was beating steady and strong. Then you don't need the instincts, I said firmly. You have me. We're going to train, and we're going to win. Chapter 25. The Preparation. The duel was set for dawn at the old amphitheater on the edge of town. We had 12 hours. We didn't spend it running laps or lifting weights. Declan's physical strength was returning by the hour, fueled by massive amounts of steak and eggs. The problem was his mind. The silver had left a fog, a hesitation between thought and action. We sat on the floor of the safe house living room. Close your eyes, I commanded. Declan obeyed. Visualize the wolf, I said softly. Don't try to control him, just find him. He breathed deeply. He's distant, hiding. Call him, I said. Use the clicker. I handed him my lucky clicker, the battered plastic box I had used to train 1,000 difficult dogs. This is our signal, I explained. When you hear this sound, it means focus. It means eyes on me. It cuts through the noise. We spent hours doing mental drills. I would create a distraction, clapping, shouting, throwing a pillow, and then click. Declan had to snap his attention to me instantly. By 3 a.m., his reaction time was flawless. The fog was lifting. We lay down on the mattress in the spare room for a few hours of rest. Colonel Mustard was asleep in his carrier, snoring softly. Declan pulled me against his chest. If I lose, he started. You won't, I interrupted. If I lose, he insisted. Rafferty has instructions to get you out of the city. You take the Subaru. You take the pig. You don't look back. I propped myself up on one elbow and looked down at him. Even in the dim light, he was the most magnificent thing I had ever seen. You listen to me, Alpha, I whispered fiercely. I did not spend 2 weeks training you just for you to roll over and play dead. You are going to walk into that pit, you are going to rip his throat out, and then you are going to come home and fix my squeaky pantry door. Do you understand? Declan smirked, the familiar arrogant glint returning to his eyes. He reached up and kissed me, slow, deep, and promising. Yes, mistress. Chapter 26. The Duel. The sun hadn't risen yet. The sky over the abandoned limestone amphitheater was a bruised purple, the air cold enough to see your breath. The entire Iron River pack had assembled on the stone tiers. They were silent, a sea of dark coats and grim faces. Victor Mercer's Copperhead Syndicate stood on the opposite side, looking smug. I stood in the front row, my hands gripping the rusted railing so hard my knuckles were white. Rafferty stood beside me, his face pale. Remember, Rafferty whispered, you cannot interfere. If you step into the ring, he forfeits. I know, I hissed. I'm just watching. Down in the pit, Declan and Mercer stood 10 paces apart. Declan looked massive, stripped to his tactical pants, the pink scar on his shoulder standing out starkly against his tanned skin. But he was still moving just a fraction too slowly. The silver fog hadn't fully lifted. Mercer, by contrast, was vibrating with energy. He smiled, his teeth already lengthening. Ready to bleed out, O'Malley? Mercer taunted. I can smell the rot in your shoulder from here. Talk less, Declan rumbled. Die faster. The referee, an elder wolf with one eye, dropped his hand. Shift. The sound was a wet, synchronized explosion of bone and muscle. Mercer shifted into a lean, copper-furred wolf, built for speed and cruelty. Declan exploded into his massive charcoal-gray form, a tank made of fur and fury. They collided in midair with a sound like 2 cars crashing. Mercer was faster. He knew about the shoulder. He feinted left, then snapped his jaws onto Declan's injured side. Declan roared, a sound of pure pain, and stumbled. The crowd gasped. Mercer didn't let up. He was a blur of teeth, slashing at Declan's hamstrings, circling, biting, and retreating. Declan snapped at him, his jaws closing on empty air. He was sluggish. The instinct wasn't firing fast enough. Mercer rammed his shoulder into Declan's flank, knocking the massive alpha off balance. Declan hit the dirt, kicking up a cloud of limestone dust. Before he could recover, Mercer was on top of him, jaws clamped around Declan's throat. Declan thrashed, his claws scrabbling on the stone, but Mercer had the leverage. He pinned Declan down, tightening his grip. A trickle of blood stained Declan's gray fur. My heart stopped. He was losing. He was dying right in front of me. Chapter 27. The Command. The silence in the amphitheater was deafening. The Iron River wolves were looking away, unable to watch their king fall. Declan's struggles were weakening. I could feel his despair through the bond. A cold, drowning sensation. He was giving up. He believed the lie that the silver had made him broken. I didn't care about the rules. I didn't care about the pack. I cared about my partner. I climbed up onto the railing. I didn't jump into the pit, but I made myself visible. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the cold morning air. "Declan!" My voice rang out, sharp and authoritative, echoing off the stone walls. The gray wolf's ear twitched. "Eyes on me!" Mercer growled, tightening his grip, but Declan's eyes shifted. They locked onto mine. The gold in them flared, burning away the murky confusion. "Engage!" I screamed, channeling every ounce of my will into the command. I saw it happen. I saw the moment the command hit him. The weeks of conditioning took over instantly. He didn't need the physical clicker. My voice was the trigger. The mental connections snapped into place like a steel cable. Declan didn't just struggle, he exploded. With a roar that shook the ground, he surged upward, twisting his massive frame and throwing the copper wolf off him as if Mercer weighed nothing. Mercer scrambled to regain his footing, but he was too late. Declan was no longer sluggish. He was a guided missile. Declan lunged, catching Mercer mid-air. His jaws clamped onto the back of Mercer's neck. He slammed the smaller wolf into the ground. Thud, 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 knocking the wind and the fight out of him. Declan stood over him, one massive paw pinning Mercer to the earth, his teeth bared at Mercer's exposed throat. Mercer whined, exposing his belly. Submission. The red haze of bloodlust was rolling off Declan in waves. I could feel he wanted to tear Mercer apart. "Declan!" I shouted one last time. "Leave it!" The massive head snapped up. He looked at me, panting, his muzzle stained with Mercer's blood. He froze. He stepped back. He huffed a spray of condensation at the defeated wolf, turned his back on him, and trotted toward me, his tail wagging slowly. Chapter 28. The Fallout. The roar from the Iron River pack was deafening. It wasn't polite applause. It was a primal screaming of victory. Mercer shifted back into human form, curled in the dirt, naked and humiliated. He gasped for air, clutching his bruised throat. "Get him out of my city," Rafferty barked to the security team. "If he crosses the bridge again, he's dead." "And Rafferty?" I called out, stopping him. The beta looked at me. "The night shift guard who let them in has been handled," Rafferty assured me grimly. "He won't be working in this city again." I nodded, satisfied. I didn't watch Mercer leave. I vaulted over the railing and slid down the gravel embankment into the pit. Declan was already shifting back. It was messy and painful, but he stood up, swaying slightly, naked and covered in dust and blood. I ran to him, throwing my arms around his waist to hold him up. He leaned his entire weight on me, burying his face in my hair. "You yelled at me," he rasped, his voice wrecked. "You were slacking off," I said, my voice trembling as tears finally spilled over. "I had to performance manage you." He laughed, a wet, breathless sound, and kissed the top of my head. "I heard you. The noise stopped. It was just your voice." Rafferty appeared with a blanket, draping it over Declan's shoulders. He looked at me with new reverence. "That was unconventional, mistress, but effective." The tank is outside, I said, wiping my eyes. Let's go home. I need a shower, and you need a steak. The drive back was noisy. The rear windshield of the Subaru was still shattered from the quarry escape, so the wind howled through the cabin, whipping my hair around. Declan sat in the passenger seat, wrapped in the blanket, his hand resting heavily on my knee. He looked exhausted, battered, and utterly at peace. "We need to fix the window," he noted, shouting over the wind. "Put it on the expense account, O'Malley," I shouted back. He smiled, closing his eyes. "Yes, mistress." Chapter 29. New Normal. 3 months later. The sign on the door was new. It was hand-painted, tasteful, and read, "The Galloway O'Malley Center. Canine Rehabilitation and Shifter Integration Therapy." I sat at my desk, reviewing the file of a new client. He was a teenage werewolf who kept shifting every time he got a C in algebra. "He needs impulse control drills," I told the mother sitting across from me, "and probably a tutor." The door to my office opened, and Declan walked in. He was wearing a suit that fit perfectly, no longer looking like he was carrying the weight of the world. "Lunch break," he announced, placing a paper bag on my desk. "I brought tacos, and organic bell peppers for the board of directors." "The board is currently napping," I said, gesturing to the corner. Declan looked at the deluxe, multi-story enclosure taking up half the office. Colonel Mustard was asleep in a hammock. Next to him was his new girlfriend, Mrs. Peacock, a fluffy white guinea pig who terrified Rafferty even more than Mustard did. "How is the Alpha meeting going?" I asked, unwrapping a taco. "Boring," Declan sighed, sitting on the edge of my desk. "No one challenges me anymore. They're all too afraid you'll show up with the spray bottle." "I only used the spray bottle once," I defended. "And Barry deserved it. He tried to mark the conference table." Declan chuckled, leaning down to kiss me. The pull was there, but it wasn't a desperate hook anymore. It was a warm, steady hum, a permanent connection. "I love you," he murmured against my lips. "I know," I smiled. "Now let me eat my taco, or I'm putting you in a crate." Chapter 30. Epilogue. 6 months later. The O'Malley estate had changed. The brutalist concrete was softened by ivy. There were dog toys in the yard. We had adopted a retired greyhound named Rocket. And inside, the silence was gone. It was Saturday morning. I walked into the living room with a cup of coffee, wearing Declan's shirt. Declan was lying on the rug. The terrifying Alpha King, the man who could lift steel beams and crush wolves with his jaw, was lying perfectly still. "Don't move," he whispered. "They're flanking me." I looked down. Colonel Mustard sat by Declan's ear, looking regal. Mrs. Peacock was by his ribs, and scrambling over his chest were 3 baby guinea pigs, tiny, chaotic fluffballs named Colonel, Cobb, and Pop. Pop, the boldest one, was currently chewing on Declan's beard. "I think you're losing this fight, O'Malley," I observed, sipping my coffee. "I am showing restraint," Declan insisted, wincing as Pop tugged a hair. "I am a benevolent ruler." "You're a jungle gym," I corrected. I sat down on the floor beside him. He shifted his arm, pulling me down so my head rested on his shoulder, careful not to disturb the rodents. "Are you happy?" he asked quietly, his hand finding mine. I looked at the chaos, the pigs, the sunlight streaming in, the man who looked at me like I hung the moon. "I'm broke," I said. "The tank finally died. I have to drive the G-Wagon, and my boyfriend has fleas." "I do not have fleas." "But," I kissed his cheek, "yeah, I'm happy." Declan smirked, that dangerous golden light flickering in his eyes for just a second. "Good girl," he whispered. I swatted his chest. "Watch it, O'Malley. Don't make me get the leash." "I'm counting on it," he grinned. And for the first time in the history of the Iron River Pack, the Alpha King let the guinea pigs win. The end.